controller configuration. Now let's look at the, how to configure a controller. Because this controller is very simple. So we will see the configuration also very simple. So let's look at the basic things we need to do in the configuration. First, we know this is the configuration file we are talking about, related to the, Spring resources. In this file, we configure Spring resources. We have another file, web.xml. In that file, we only configure front controller. So remember the front controller concept. We talked a lot last time. Front controller. But that's in the web.xml. Other than that, all the remaining resources configured in this file. All right? So let's look at the configuration. For our controller, hello controller, you can see this simple. This being element, ID attribute, class attribute. So you can see the meaning is pretty obvious. The first, we use the being element. So what's the meaning of being? In Spring, any resource in the Spring frameworks, we can call it a being. So not necessarily Java being, much broader than Java being. Any resource, we can call it a being. We configure it as a being. Then ID must be unique. So if you use ID attribute, make sure each being has a different ID. So you use it to identify the being. Because later, in other beings, you may need to refer to this particular being to do something special. So you need that unique name. Then the concrete Java class. So that's the, the location. So WinJoTel, including the package part, our specific Java class name. Then, with that, you just tell the container. So the container will instantiate this being, using the usual instantiation way. So this way. We will not see this line anywhere because it's hidden. So the container does it in a hidden way. So that's simple. So you see this corresponds to the reference, the ID. Constructor comes from the class. You tell the name of the class. All right. So you can see that's the simple configuration of our first controller. But later, when we do things more and more complicated, you can see the configuration could be more and more complicated. All right, so next, configure handler mapping. How do you call a controller, right? So when there is a request, how do you connect that request to a particular controller? You need to do somewhere in the configuration file by some mapping rule. So then we do it here. Still, in the same configuration file, we have this being element, also another being. So you see another resource, another being. But this one, in order to establish the mapping, we need to use a special Springs class, simple URL handler mapping. Simple URL handler mapping. Spring provides us the special class. Yeah. All right. So this class directly maps URL patterns to handlers. Handlers means controllers, right? Yeah. Another name for controllers. Yeah. All right. How to, here, you see the detail. Yeah. Here. URL patterns, this part, URL pattern. Okay? Yeah. /index.htm. Yeah. So remember, yeah, that part. So that's the URL we use to call this controller, hello controller. Yeah. And next, the handler part, the ID. In the previous slide, the ID of that being hello controller. So you connect to that hello controller, that being ID. So here you use that. Yeah. So this kind of thing, you establish one-to-one correspondence through property. So this is one property. Key value pair, key value. See? Also key value pair. Yeah. Yeah. Key. So you treat URL and controller ID as key value pair. URL is the key, controller ID as the value, because that's the object name. That object name is used as the value. Yeah. All right. Then props element. Yeah. You do the mapping inside that props element, and props, so if you have more controllers, you can add more. Another one, another one, another one. Each one, you establish URL to controller mapping in this way. This is the simple URL handler mapping way. There are many other ways. Yeah, this is just the first way. Yeah, this is the most commonly used way. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Yeah. But remember, here we're talking about still the old Spring MVC way. The new, all these things will be gone. Yeah. The new version, we will use annotation way. Annotation will do the same thing. Actually, annotation can do more than this, more than we are doing here. Yeah, very, very powerful. Yeah. All right. Then, this props element, yeah, we expect a list of properties inside it. So those multiple properties will be used to construct a Java properties object. Java has a special object, properties, store all the properties. Remember, in our module 1, we load .properties file, right? Remember, our configuration we load, we store in a .properties the file. There are many lines in that file. Each line corresponds to one property. Okay? Yeah. So here we get a property object, but not from the .properties file, but from this element of the configuration. Yeah. Also, we can get that. All right. Next, this element, property attribute name equals mapping. Yeah, here. You need to use this to call a special method in this simple URL handler mapping. Yeah, that's this one. Yeah. In that class, there is a method called a set mappings parameter properties. Yeah, remember the property comes from here. Yeah. And the property name mappings the property name. Yeah. So you set it. You set to that property. Yeah. Then you're done. So after, the container will do all these things. After container does all these, then the whole project can work as expected. Yeah. All right, so that's our B.2 video.